Shortly after becoming boss in 1981, Nicky Scarfo began having problems with an old-school South Philly mob associate named Frankie Flowers, D'Alfonso. D'Alfonso had been closely aligned with former boss Angelo Bruno and had a lucrative working relationship with Bruno. The two men dabbled together in such ventures as bookmaking, loan sharking, real estate development, casino junkets, and even a closed-circuit television business. Bruno and D'Alfonso made a great deal of money together, but Angelo Bruno was dead, and Nicky Scarfo, the new boss, felt entitled to not only the money that D'Alfonso had been paying Bruno, but an even larger share. When D'Alfonso balked, Scarfo ordered him beaten within an inch of his life. He called on Salvie Testa and Testa's sidekick, Gino Milano, to carry out the beating. But there was a problem. Salvie came back and told my uncle that every time him and Gino thought they had Flowers, he was always with the Gita, and they didn't want to do the beatdown in front of him. The Geeter with the heater was a popular Philadelphia area disc jockey named Jerry Blabbett, who was primarily known for spinning oldies records on his radio show for his nightclub Memories in Margate, and for the record hops he held at catering halls and nightclubs in South Jersey and Philadelphia. When Ange was boss, the Gita was around him a lot. He'd be at parties or gatherings we'd attend, and we got to know who he was. When Ange died, the Gita was hanging around Frankie Flowers, who had been real close with Ange. So, around this time, Salvie and Gino, they're trying to give Frankie Flowers that beatdown my uncle ordered. But the Gita, he was always hanging around Flowers, getting in the fucking way of us doing what we were trying to do. A week later, Salvie calls Flowers from a payphone in the Italian market on the pretense of discussing business. Armed with a baseball bat and steel pipe, he and Gino Milano ambushed D'Alfonso on a South Philadelphia street corner, beating him so badly that Frankie Flowers would spend several months in the hospital. D'Alfonso got the message. He started paying Scarfo's street tax, and for a while, Scarfo seemed content with their arrangement. But as time passed, D'Alfonso began to pay less, and then stopped paying altogether. In the summer of '85, my uncle decides he had had enough of Frankie Flowers. He wants to kill him. But Flowers did business with Benny Eggs in New York, who was the Chin's underboss. My uncle goes through the proper channels. He reaches out to Benny Eggs and the Chin through Bobby Manna, who was consigliere. My uncle sent word that he wants to kill Flowers. The message we got back from New York was do what you gotta do. So we banged him out as he was walking down the street near the Italian market in South Philly. They hit him 5 times. He died right there in the street. My uncle loved it. He said, every once in a while, you gotta show people this. And he made the sign of a gun. Keeps them in line. The July 1985 murder of Frankie Flowers served as a reminder to everyone. Failure to pay the Scarfo street tax would result in death. In the weeks that followed the D'Alfonso murder, the cash was pouring in faster than it ever had before. You have to remember, all the shakedown money, the money we got from the street tax, went into what we called the elbow, and it was divided between my uncle. He would take half, and me, Chucky, Lawrence, Salvie, and Ciancaglini would split the other half. But Salvie was dead, and Ciancaglini was in jail. So the elbow was now just the 4 of us. As 1985 came to a close, there was yet another mob hit that made national news. Only this time, it had nothing to do with Nicky Scarfo, Philip Leonetti, or the Philadelphia Atlantic City mob.
Bullets that ended Big Paul Castellano's life last night may very well have been a payoff for getting into such trouble with the feds. As the reputed head of the Crime Commission and the godfather of the Gambino family, his appearance in court every day and the preoccupation with his defense were bad for business. Experts say his associates may very well have decided Big Paul was more trouble than he was worth.
The violent death of Paul Castellano brings back to vivid life an old tradition in the history of this country: gangland executions. Shakespeare said of kings, "Uneasy lies the head that wears a crown." The same might be said of those who rise to the top of organized crime. They get there by violence, and often as not, they leave by violence. 1957, Albert Anastasia, the head of Murder Incorporated, murdered while he was having a haircut on West 59th Street. 1971, Joseph Colombo, head of the Colombo family, shot in Columbus Circle, 7 years in a coma, and then he died in 1978. 1972, Joey Gallo killed in Little Italy during dinner at Umberto's Clam House. 1979, Carmine Galante, boss of the Bonanno family, killed at a restaurant in Brooklyn. And yesterday, Paul Castellano, the head of the Gambino family, the largest of them all in this country, murdered outside a restaurant on East 46th Street. In the world of organized crime, the tradition is that murders do not go unavenged. Still, traditions have a way of changing, even in the Mafia.
Recent indictments and prosecutions of the mob leaders is causing an upheaval in the underworld, yet efforts by the prosecutors to put the crime kingpins in jail are still subject to organized crime's way of doing things, their own kind of law, public murder.
The ability of the mob to kill people in cold blood and get away with it gives them the ability to terrorize other people.
They terrorize by killing their own in public. Deadly messages from organized crime to organized crime and the rest of society. The murder of Gambino crime family boss Paul Castellano yesterday, or the 1979 assassination of Cosa Nostra Don Carmine Galante. Unsolved, very public executions by an underworld that plays by their own rules and their own code of justice. The Castellano murder particularly brazen and defiant, since Castellano was gunned down a day before he was to resume standing trial for auto theft and murder. Organized crime had served up its own sentence.
My uncle and I had dealt with Castellano a couple of times, and he helped us with the murder of Johnny Keys by authorizing Sammy to do it. But that's about it. My uncle used to say that Castellano reminded him of Ange, meaning he was more of a businessman, less of a gangster. That's the same thing Sammy used to say about Castellano. He'd say, "This guy ain't a street guy like us, like your uncle. This guy, he thinks we're fucking IBM and not the Gambino crime family." Around this time, I was hearing a lot about John Gotti, most of it coming directly from Sammy. John and Sammy had become very close, and Sammy would say to me, "John's like us, Philip. He's a gangster's gangster. You and your uncle, you're gonna like this guy." Me and Sammy had become real close, and we'd go out drinking together, or go out to dinner when he would come down to Atlantic City. I helped him when he got assigned the contract on this guy, Frankie Stilatano. Everyone called him Frankie Steele in '81, after Frankie killed Nick Russo's son over in Trenton. My uncle and Nick Russo, they had always been close. They were in Yardville together. We used to call him the Reverend. Nick Russo ran the Gambino family's operations in Trenton. Our family also had a presence in Trenton. Everything was always smooth between the two families because Nick, he was an absolute gentleman. Now, Frankie Stilatano was a cowboy, a fucking renegade. He had some problems with Nick Russo, and ultimately, Nick Russo's son. One night, after they had an altercation, Stilatano opened up on them as they left a bar in Trenton. He shot Nick Russo and killed his son. The Gambinos, they were looking to kill Stilatano, but no one could find him. The cocksucker went into hiding. Sammy came down and saw me and my uncle and asked us for help in trying to find him. This was after Sammy and his crew had done the Johnny Keys hit while we were on trial. Scarfo and Leonetti knew that Frankie Stilatano had connections to a loose-knit group of Irish gangsters that worked out of the Northeast Philadelphia. We found him, and we shot him in the head. We left his body in the trunk of a car at the Philadelphia airport. Sammy came right down to thank us for whacking this fuck out. That's the kind of guy he was, Sammy. He was real big on respect. A few days after Castellano gets killed, Sammy comes down and tells me and my uncle everything is okay in New York, and after New Year's he wants us to come up to Staten Island to meet his new boss, which we knew was John Gotti, but Sammy didn't tell us who it was. I had heard from Black and Apolli that Sammy was going to be part of the new Gambino administration, either underboss or consigliere. As the NYPD and the FBI investigated the murders of Paul Castellano and Thomas Bellotti in New York, Nicky Scarfo was busy throwing his annual Christmas party in South Philadelphia. Everyone was there, and everyone brings an envelope. That's how it was. This was a good fucking party. But Chucky was fall down fucking drunk. I mean, I'd never seen him that bad. My uncle was furious. Chucky was the underboss, and as underboss, you just can't fucking behave like that. It makes the family look bad. And with my uncle, it was always about appearances and his reputation. See, Chucky didn't really want to be underboss. He just wanted to stay in South Philly, drink his wine, have a couple of businesses. Merlino couldn't handle the responsibility. He drank too fucking much. And then when the pressure built, he drank some more. There was this one time when Scarfo took Merlino up to New York for a meeting with some ranking members of the Gambino organization. Scarfo and the Gambinos were discussing a business venture involving jukeboxes equipped with video screens, a new pay-for-play technology aimed at the MTV generation. The mob was ready to cash in. In addition to placing and servicing the jukeboxes, the deal involved selling advertising space. Typed commercial messages could be flashed across the bottom of the screen during video performances. Scarfo was angling to set up distributorships up and down the East Coast. At this meeting in New York, Nicky goes upstairs to meet with some guys. He tells Chucky to wait down in the bar with some other guys. By the time Nicky comes down, Chucky's drunk. He's made a pass at somebody's wife, and he's in an argument with somebody at the bar. Nicky's embarrassed in front of these New York guys. I mean, how's it look? You're a fucking underboss. Drunk. After the party, when we were driving back to Atlantic City, I could tell that my uncle was steaming about Chucky. But we were in the car, so he's not going to say anything. We never talk in the car. The next day, we go for lunch at the Bristol Cafe, and he says to me, I can't take any more of this guy's drunkenness. It's a fucking embarrassment to me. And it makes us look weak. Now, I had already voiced my opinion about a month or so prior, so my uncle knew where I stood in regards to killing either Chucky or Lawrence. And regardless, Chucky was going to jail in a couple of weeks. He had to do the 4 years on that bribery case. So I say to my uncle, maybe we should have a sit down with them. But Chucky and Lawrence are solid, Uncle Nick. They've always been. Now, you have to understand, I had to be very careful with my uncle. If he thought for 1 second that I wasn't 100% with him, or that I was going against him, he would have had me killed in a heartbeat. The fact that I was his nephew, his own blood, meant absolutely nothing to him if he thought I was challenging him as boss, which I was, by not backing him up on his plans to take out Chucky and Lawrence. We finished our lunch and didn't discuss it any further. A few days after Christmas, Scarfo Leonetti and the entire Philadelphia Atlantic City mob, including the Merlino brothers, headed down to Casablanca South for another winter retreat. When we were down there, Chucky's drinking got even worse. I mean, he was drunk the whole fucking time we were there. I could tell my uncle had had it with both him and Lawrence, and was now starting to get angry with me because of the position I had taken. Everything was fucked up at this point. Nothing was right. Everything seemed off. Philip Leonetti knew that changes were coming. He just didn't know what they would be, or who may be dying as a result. A few days after we got back to Atlantic City, my uncle set up a meeting with Bobby Manna in North Jersey, and I drove him up. Now, every time we met with Bobby, it was something serious. So, we're sitting there, and I have no idea what this is about. It was just me, my uncle, and Bobby. My uncle says, I'm thinking of taking Chucky down and putting my nephew up. What are your thoughts? Do you think he's old enough? What my uncle was saying is he wanted to demote Chucky from underboss back down to soldier, and he wanted to elevate me from captain to underboss. I think he wanted Bobby's opinion because I was so young. I was only 32 at the time. So Bobby says, Nick, if you feel he knows the rules and he knows how this thing works, then I don't think how old he is really matters much. Don't forget, Luciano, Lansky, and Capone were all in their 20s when they started this thing. So I don't think age really matters here. My uncle just nods, looks at me, and pats me on the back of the head. A week later, Nicodemo Scarfo called a meeting where he announced to the members of his crime family that Salvatore Chucky Merlino and his brother Lawrence Merlino were being taken down, and that his nephew Philip Leonetti was now the new underboss of the Philadelphia Atlantic City mob. Neither of the Merlinos were invited to the meeting. My uncle addresses the family and says, "I'm going to give Chucky a break here. I've known him a long time. Now, I know he's going to jail in a few weeks. I'm going to let him go to jail. Clean up his act. Sober the fuck up. If he does that, we will welcome him back into this family when he comes home. If he doesn't, it's this." And he does the sign of the gun. For him, his brother, and maybe his son. At 32 years old, Philip Leonetti became the youngest underboss in the modern-day history of La Cosa Nostra. He was the number 2 man behind his uncle, Nicodemo Little Nicky Scarfo, one of the most powerful mafia dons in the United States. And he couldn't have been less happy about it. I was numb. I didn't have a feeling one way or the other. By this time, I was so sick of my uncle and all of his treachery. I didn't even want to be around him anymore, let alone be involved in Cosa Nostra. That's how bad it had gotten.
The only people that Nicky Scarfo thought he could really trust were his own blood relatives. In the winter of 1986, he sought permission from the Commission, the Mafia's secret government in New York, to make his nephew Philip the underboss of the family. New York gave their approval.
Philip was the number 2 man in the family. He was the underboss of the family. And any time that anybody had a problem with the labor union, they would approach Philip, and Philip would approach one of the people that he had control over in the labor movement. And if he had a problem with the laborers union or a Teamsters union or cement masons or iron workers official, he would just call them and tell them, "This is our project, keep your people away from it. We're going to do whatever we want to do there, and you guys stay away," and that's exactly what would happen. And so any time that the mob wanted to do anything in Atlantic City, they would approach Leonetti. Leonetti would give them their approval, and then he would tell the union officials, "Stay away."
People have said they were very afraid of you.
Well, if they did something wrong to our family, or if they did something wrong to me at that time, yeah, I guess they would be very afraid.
Why?
They should be, because there's a possibility they could be killed, you know, or whatever they did. Of course, we weren't playing games. Everybody, it's a serious thing. And whoever did something wrong with us, especially with my uncle, I mean, got killed. That's what we did. That's what we knew how to do, kill people.
But the killing would eventually get to Leonetti. Even he couldn't stomach the cold-blooded murder of Salvie Testa, his childhood friend. He began to question his blind loyalty to his uncle and his oath of allegiance to the Mafia. Eventually, Philip Leonetti, the underboss of the family, would become one of the highest-ranking defectors ever to betray La Cosa Nostra.
As Leonetti began to settle into his new position, as underboss. Scarfo placed the relatively inexperienced duo of Francis Faffi Inarella and Tommy Del Giorno in charge of the family street operation in Philadelphia, and entrusted them with delivering the news to the Merlino brothers that they had been taken down. My uncle said to me, in a very aggressive tone, "If I gotta see either one of them fucks, if either one of them try and come down here and see me, I am ordering you. Kill them on the fucking spot. This is a direct fucking order from me to you. I'm not your uncle saying this. I'm your boss in Cosa Nostra. If you don't want to see them dead, you tell them to stay the fuck in Philadelphia. Clean up their fucking act." It was as if my uncle was saying that he spared their lives because I had spoken against it. But he was now warning me that they were on very thin ice. The very next day, I get a call in the office from Chucky. "Philip, what's going on? He took us down. Now he won't see me?" "Chucky, just stay in Philadelphia. Be with your family. Go do your sentence. Everything will be okay." What did I do? I didn't do anything. I just want to come down and talk. Okay, I just want to talk to him. I just want to straighten things out before I leave. Chuck, please don't come here. Please don't. Be with your family. Go do your time. Everything is going to be okay. But please, do not come here. I am begging you, Chucky. Don't do it. Salvatore Chucky Merlino had been around Nicky Scarfo for over 30 years, and he knew by the tone of Philip Leonetti's voice in imploring him not to come to Atlantic City that Leonetti was warning him of Scarfo's desire to kill him if he did. Merlino spent the next few weeks in South Philadelphia, then turned himself in a few weeks later, on February 21st, 1986, to begin serving his 4-year prison sentence. His brother Lawrence apparently got the memo and avoided Scarfo, Leonetti, and Georgia Avenue at all costs. The Scarfo mob, which had thrived with Salvatore Chucky Merlino as underboss and Salvatore Salvie Testa as street boss, was no longer. Testa had been murdered on Scarfo's orders, and Chucky Merlino was behind bars, stripped of his rank. I didn't save Chucky and Lawrence's life with that phone call. I saved my uncle's. Because there was no way I was killing either one of them. And if push came to shove, I was going to kill my uncle. I was absolutely disgusted with him. Because at that point, if I had disobeyed his direct order to me to kill either one of them, he would have had me killed. And then he would have killed them. That is how bad things were at this time. We weren't a family